College football coaches are now pushing for bigger, cleaner, and an earlier playoff. Sounds reasonable, right? End the season sooner, reduce the calendar strain, give more teams a shot. Maybe even get rid of conference championship games and use that weekend for the playoff. But here's the problem. The same coaches pushing for more playoff access are also the people who benefit the most from playoff access. Because if you expand this thing to 16, 20, 24 teams, suddenly a 9-3 season becomes a playoff season. Suddenly more coaches can sell progress. More coaches can sell recruiting momentum. More coaches can call their athletic directors, donors, and fan bases and say, hey, we made the tournament. So tonight, the question is not whether the college football playoff should expand. The question is, are we fixing college football's broken calendar, or are we watering down the regular season, killing conference championship games, and pretending it's all about player welfare? And for Oklahoma fans, Brent Venables is now attached to this conversation through the AFCA. So what does that mean for OU, the SEC, and the future of the sport? Let's talk about it. Good evening. Whoa, shit. Good evening, and welcome back to Sooner Intel. I'm your host, Jason Watkins, along with my co-hosts, Kchris Griffin of the Horns Down podcast, and Mr. Mason, Chris Mason of Sooners 360. If you love college football, especially OU football, you know you're in the right place. So before you forget, hit that like, subscribe, and share on all three channels. Like our videos, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss a moment of Sooner Intel. Gentlemen. Brent Venables is doing a caravan around the state of Oklahoma, talking to fans, letting everybody know how great his team is. And apparently he's a big part of this AFCA committee that's making recommendations to expand this playoff as large as possible moving forward. What say you, Mr. Mason? Oh, you're muted, sir.
About the Sooner Caravan or this 24-team playoff thing?
Tell you what, let's bury the lead. Let's talk about the caravan first. Let's get into that stuff first. Let's talk about Brent Venables in OKC last night, talking about some players that really haven't been spoken about a ton in the spring, but who he really sees making big pushes forward. I thought that was a big deal with some of that, but go ahead.
Well, obviously, Jim Nagy was also there talking. Roger Denny was doing his spiel. Porter Moser was talking about his recent portal additions, as was Jenny Baranczyk, but we're not really a basketball show, so we'll leave that alone. But both Porter and Jenny sky high on the guys they picked up, guys and girls they picked up in the portal. So just as a teaser for that. So that all sounded good. So Nagy and both Brent mentioned names. They were asked. They didn't do a Q&A, but they talked about spring stars, people who had big springs. And I thought it was interesting that Nagy's first name, when he was asked about, someone who's going to surprise us this fall, was how the question was phrased. And Nagy's response was Jake Makala, the center, who we didn't really talk about a lot, but has been getting a lot of buzz from both Gabe and Teddy and Nagy. So if Jake Makala is a star this fall for us at center, that answers a lot of questions. That's a big question being answered right there. And then Brent was asked the question, to name just one player. So, of course, he named three. So the names are guys we've talked about a lot, but it is obviously refreshing to hear Brent reference them again. It's Michael Boganowski, who is, on a certain level, technically the only new starter on defense. Trent Wilson, and then Nigel Smith. So if Brent and Nagy are correct, and they have the best view, they have the best football acumen in the room. If those four guys all surprise us, are big factors this fall, I don't know how you could say spring didn't go great. I mean, those are four guys off the top. I mean, if Bogo is a star safety next to Peyton Bowen, who Gabe Eichert thought had the best spring of anybody, offense or defense. He thought he was OU's best player this spring. If you combine Peyton Bowen with Boganowski, with Eli Bowen, Cortland Guillory, that if Boganowski's playing as well as Brent thinks he's going to play, that says OU may have the best secondary in the SEC. So
yeah. Listen, I mean, I would kind of pass that to Kchris right now because, I mean, we've talked ad nauseum quite a bit about the way that Michael Boganowski Jr. looked at the end of the season last year, particularly like that Tennessee game where he kind of shut down the middle of the field passing-wise and was able to – it almost felt like he forced those interceptions by being where he was. They couldn't go to that spot, and then we've seen him in the run game, and of course he's a big old hitter, but what are your thoughts about that, about these revelations, I guess, Kchris?
Well, just keeping it on Boganowski, I would say that I think that you're looking at him to pick up where RSJ left off. I think that you're kind of wanting to see him be able to, how should I say this? You want him to be a good cover guy, right? Not get his eyes caught up in the backfield and all the rest of that stuff, but you also want him to be the guy that not only can blitz, but also can be hell in the run game as well, as far as providing run support. So he's a guy that I think could potentially could do both of that, right? So obviously you had Bowman, you had RSJ, had Peyton Bowen in the mix, a few years ago or whatnot. But I think at that other position that could be elevated now.
Sure.
with his play, and I think that what you're most excited about is that there shouldn't be that much drop off when he and Peyton Bowen are off the field with the guys they have backing them up. But with Boganowski, I look for him to kind of put the world on notice of who he really is this year, just with a lot of his skill set. But I'm looking for us to be able to do a lot of different things. I think with a guy like that, especially if our corners are as good as we think they are, then on that back end, they're going to be in a lot of, man situations. And I think it's going to prove going our way an awful lot. But he's a physical guy. The whole Bam Bam nickname. We know that he likes to hit. But he's a guy when he gets close to the ball, different things like that, disguising those blitzers or whatever. We know that's great. But also just some of the things that he did last year, kind of in that zone scheme, just being able to kind of shut down that middle of the field, rob, do different things, play discipline, play fundamental football, and stick within the defense. I think it was great. Showed maturity and showed actual just kind of progression for him. But I think now it's time for him to kind of take that next step. He and Peyton going to be elite. With that. So you got to trust BV, but you also definitely got to trust Brendan Hall with what he's doing with those guys on the back end.
No doubt about it. I would toss in there Reggie Powers as well. Obviously, he looks to be the main cheetah, the main guy at the cheetah position, but he's also been, able to play at safety as well. I think you might see some of that when you add another one back there in certain situations. We know that that what the defense looks like personnel-wise changes throughout the game all the time. They seem to have it seems to be almost a positionless secondary when it all boils down to it sometimes. So that's just kind of but Reggie Powers being that linebacker hybrid, along with being a safety, and then you've got guys like, we keep talking about some of these younger guys like that are hoping to get their opportunities as well when you've got young corners and things like that. But you got Jeremiah Newcomb that appears to be another one of those guys that could play cheetah on the other end, as more of a coverage cheetah, or he could, and he seems to bring the pain hit wise. like some safeties would as well. So I think you're seeing more and more of that all the time, right?
Definitely. So I also think like I said, if Nagy's right and Jake Makala has a great year, that just bodes so well for the offensive line, right? Nagy thinks he's going to be a draft pick. He's going to be a draft pick. And if that guy leading our new scheme, he's athletic, he looks better than ever with the weight he put back on, that speeds well. But I got to say that Brent seems sky high on Trent Wilson and Nigel Smith, and if that pans out with the return of Stone and Jackson, then some of the pundits are like, well, there should be maybe some minor regression with the OU defense. I'll just say it right now. If Wilson and Smith are playing as well as Brent thinks they're going to play, I don't see where the regression comes on the OU defense. I just don't.
I don't either, and I've been a Nigel Smith guy for a long time, since he was a recruit with the program. We had him on the show before, and watching his film and watching his athleticism, and then seeing the transformation that you've seen body-wise since he got on campus. Obviously, when you start talking about Trent, he came in and he already looked like he was a 40-year-old truck driver ready to get going, right? So, you're talking about guys that are you've got some young guys that have, Tank Carrington is a guy that has there's been plenty of conversation about him throughout the offseason and certainly during the spring period about how well he played as a true freshman coming in, getting to 300 pounds almost immediately. He stands to make, some kind of impact and get some kind of playing time as well. But I feel like the guys that they have there now, and this is no shade to anybody that has been here or in what they've done in the past, I think that the floors are higher, though, and the ceilings are higher as well. So I'm with you. I don't think that there's a drop-off in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
I don't think there's a drop-off.
Yeah, so those are the guys mentioned as the surprise guys, but Brent also went into the freshmen. So you already mentioned Tank Carrington, or Tankosaurus as his nickname is, which I think is kind of awesome. That he has a nickname on it. He has a nickname on his nickname, which I think is
a nickname for his nickname.
That's kind of like a meta level of, and it's such a great name Tank's a great defensive tackle name, but Tankosaurus is like even better. So just off topic, but so Brent highlighted Noah Best at center. And to give you guys a little bit of a recruiting spin, I think Noah Best's spring is the reason OU backed off Gus Corsair, who just verbaled to Oregon. I think, because Gus Corsair is a center primarily, and I think Noah Best looking that good, OU's like, do we need to sign just a dedicated center, someone who probably only can play center versus signing other guys who have some more positional flexibility? So that's how good Noah Best's spring was. He was just fantastic. And then, we mentioned Tank Carrington, and then he mentioned Jasir Rogers, which we've talked about before. You guys were all over Des Walker with your spring game review. We've talked about Jonathan Hatton, but the guy I might want to give a little focus to, shout out to Chris's unk, is Brent went out to his way to mention Derek Johnson, freshman cornerback.
That's his guy. That is definitely his guy.
That's Unk's guy. That is Unk's guy, isn't it? He talks about him quite a bit.
What did he say?
He said that. I had a source at the Caravan who was taking notes for me. So he said Derek Johnson had a great spring. He needs to add some weight, get stronger. But he says, his dad played college football and coached Derek up. And that Derek just jumped right in, not afraid to do anything. They love where he's at, and I think he's going to get reps at cornerback, where they're going to play a lot of depth. We know that. I think Derek Johnson probably won't redshirt and will probably be in the mix a little bit, which I think is kind of a surprise, but speaks heavily to his talent level.
No, when I was watching him, at the spring game, just kind of walking up and down, talking with his teammates and stuff like that, and going through some of those warm-ups with his group, right, with his unit. I was like, he definitely needs to gain some weight, some more muscle, but at the same time, I was like, I'm sure that he's not too far off. But Corner is going to be interesting this year. New coach. We haven't really talked about it all that much, but it should be really interesting with just, you have the new position coach. You know what Lamar, you kind of you're getting a feel for what Lamar Morgan wants to do. You know how disciplined he is. You are, I'm sure that he's going to play a bunch of guys. We know who the top three are, but it's just, who's that fourth guy, right? Is it Tristan Haynes? Is it the Derek Johnsons of the world? Can it be a Dakota Fields or a guy like that? So you're kind of just wondering who is on that too deep, like for real, right? So I think it'll be interesting this year to see. I'm just hoping that we have continuity at that position, which I believe we will, and the talent shines again.
Yeah, I hope the top three are just on the field for the majority of the time, but we're able to sub in freshmen with veterans, new players with veterans, so that they have a mentor out there. And it looks like we might have the chance to sub in and let Tristan Haynes or maybe Derek Johnson play with three veterans out there in the secondary, right? So they're learning the game, but they've got veterans around them, which we just never had that ability before, right? To have that sort of mentorship, player coaching mentorship going on, and we now have it. You saw Taylor Wine do it in spring. You saw David Stone doing it, even though he wasn't healthy. He was, constantly in the practice stuff that we saw. He was constantly talking up Nigel Smith and Carrington and those guys. So I just thought it was interesting. Derek Johnson made the list along with four guys we know are gonna play a lot, right? I mean, Blaylock and X-Rob are gonna have to be completely healthy for 12 games and play their asses off to keep Hatton and Walker, in a marginalized backup role, right? I mean, they'd have to be.
I would say that about to not to correct you, but I would say that about X-Rob. Blaylock played all the games last year.
That's true. Your correction is right. But I would say Blaylock and X-Rob are going to have fantastic starter reps.
I think you're right about that.
Be healthy. Let's just call it. If we'd had two healthy running backs behind, they wouldn't have had to use Blaylock the way they did. He played because he had to. If we'd had two primary running backs behind him, they probably would have sat him more, and he wouldn't
last
have
year. As far as Torrey, But I think that he was showing in. I don't know how hurt. I don't want to bring this up at all, but I don't know how hurt our guy was anyway. The other one. And I don't even want to say his name. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I know something was up there. I think that Torrey Blaylock showed himself to be one of the guys that you needed to play him. You know what I mean? They could depend on him, and even through the injury, because he banged up that shoulder in week one. You know what I mean? The first game of the season, and continued to play through it. So, but it was a bad situation. And to be fair to X-Rob, it was a bad situation for both of them.
Yeah, right.
In view of the fact that their run game scheme was bad, the line was new and not gelled, especially early on. It was tough to get going. And then, of course, Mateer made the decision to not hand the ball off in the RPO more times than he didn't.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that if when we're talking about the guys that are going to make an impact this fall, and you add Derek Johnson to Tank Carrington, Jasir Rogers,
I would agree with you.
That's what my main point was. That just raises what they think about Derek Johnson, and that was, that's.
And to be fair, Mr. Mason, I'm not trying to trash anything what you're saying, because I think Hatton and Walker, we watched what those guys were doing in the spring game, and Zephyr Walker was able to break two big ones. I mean, and he hit the hole hard, and I mean these are. I mean, to use your line, I love this line that you use it the most. When your dog's going to bite, they bite as a puppy. Those puppies were snarling and biting, both of them. You know what I mean? And so they were ready to rock and roll. And so I think that I think that's a very competitive room, which isn't anything but a great thing, right? I mean, no matter what, may the best man win it, and whoever doesn't, I mean, look, hopefully you hang around for long enough in case that, obviously you hang around throughout the season in case anybody gets hurt, but it should be the best guy plays, no matter whether he's a freshman, sophomore, whatever. It doesn't matter.
That's the great part of the conversation. All these guys have there's something that they're gonna have to prove it, right? I literally about a few hours ago I got off the phone with my uncle. We were talking about PJ and Okoye, right? I told him, I was like, I think that it may take something miraculous for PJ to do to actually get that starting spot over Okoye with just how great he's looked, right? But my uncle, he made a
Man,
good point as well. He
you
said,
may
hey,
be right.
he said, the problem is that they may give the nod to PJ just because, but he said also, the thing you got to think about as well is that if they're neck and neck, PJ's looking good, he's healthy and everything and stuff like that. That's something that plays into it as well. But I think the thing is that the best players are going to play. New regime, new everything. X
Yeah.
Rob, I think X Rob got to stay healthy. I mean that's point blank. Period. I think for a guy like Torrey Blaylock, Jason, you probably gonna be mad at me for saying this, but you got to run to the space. I don't need my fastest back trying to run over somebody. I want the physicality,
We
but I
love
need
it that you were physical, but run around the dude.
run
I get it.
around the
Yeah,
ball.
yeah.
We
Yeah,
want
yeah,
home
yeah,
run.
yeah.
You have home run ability, so that's
I
what
think
we
his
need to
pops would
see.
probably tell him that too,
Yeah,
Kchris.
we need you to actually be healthy throughout the year, not with your shoulder and all the rest of that stuff. But I think with those three new coaches, I think for everything you could talk about recruiting and all the rest of this stuff, I think the biggest thing that you can talk about with those guys is simple fact is that they know how to get it done at this level and they know what it's supposed to look like. Um, and you could say, hey, the verdict is still out on Jason Witten per se, but at the same time, you just say, I know that those guys know what it looks like to play winning football at those three positions. So I trust that it's going to get done. So it may take a second, but at the same time, you have to be excited just for the simple fact of if you were tired of what you were seeing from Joe John, not necessarily just recruiting Chris Mason, but you're just tired of what you saw on the field. If you were
No. I mean, it would have been one thing if he recruited and he was signing these lower end guys, but then all of a sudden on the field they were playing like animals. So, they were beasts out there. Be like, okay, I guess Joe John knows better than me about what to do, but it was not recruiting talent, and the guys he was recruiting just injured, not showing up on the field, and kind of like
But not
who
only that, it's just to the point of like even going to the Marco, you're just looking at it like, okay, if you are ready for a new running style, right? I
yeah.
think for me, Jason can definitely attest to this. I always said I envy watching North Texas and Cal and West Virginia, just watching them just get downhill. Like their running backs, I'm not gonna say they were better than anything that we had, but it's just like
It's
Sawchuck
a
was never,
commitment. It's a commitment.
yes, Sawchuck was never going to be Kennedy Brooks. That just was not his game. And so it was a style that was kind of,
Or Eric Gray.
yeah, at times it felt forced on some of the players that we had. This is what I say. Regardless, though, again, this is just something that I'm excited to see is how that new dynamic works and what their rotations really look like and who do they prefer out there because I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and so the general tenor, obviously, from my person who was there was that Brent and Nagy were. I mean, obviously it's an alumni event. You're not going to be downing anything. So that being said, for an event like this, they were sky high about this football team. They were very confident. Nagy mentioned that he thought there were 14 possible draft picks on this roster. And if that pans out to be true, that puts OU right in the mix of the most draft picks. I think OU has one or two first rounders, maybe three, depending if things go exactly the right way. But I think it's the depth on this roster. Second, I think there's like 7 or 8 second or third rounders based upon what we just saw. So, based upon that, Nagy saying that you go from just Bowman and Stutz to to a bigger group this year, and then next year,
Yeah,
potentially.
seven draft picks this year and 14 next year. Is what he's saying.
He's saying potentially upwards of 10 to 14. He said, I got 10 to 14 guys who he think will be draft picks, and that puts OU in that top tier if that ends up panning out to be true. I mean,
Yeah, and
obviously David Stone is the guy that's getting in the first round mocks, right? I think Taylor Wine is a potential first-round pick. I think there's a chance that if Peyton Bowen has the kind of season Gabe Eichert's talking about, if he tested well, he could have that kind of season as well. I mean, if he, I mean, you saw the end of last year, he was making, I mean, Bama game, LSU game. I mean, he was constantly making game-saving plays for us, right? I mean, so I think, if you had 3 first-round picks, and then, I think Hayden Hanson's a pick. I think based upon how they're talking, Makala and Amarian Harris
How could it not be? How could those
Satania.
guys not be those big tight ends that are 6'8" and 268, 280?
I would say this right here. I literally had this conversation the other day, and I said, I think at the very least, when you're talking draft now, and I think and beyond, I think that guys are getting taken a whole lot sooner. No pun intended, than what they had been. But I think that it is, if anybody is listening to the breakdown, that's one thing I definitely take to heart, is the simple fact of the pro days here at OU, the combines, they need to be better. There needs to be an increase in combine invites, and there needs to be a increase in draftees. And so I think you've been trending in that direction lately, and I think that again, our guys stick. Our guys usually, if wherever they're drafted, they usually stick on rosters and they go there and they play. So I think that's something that is interesting. But when he said 10 to 14, I said I agree with that. I think the talent is there. And I be honest with you, Chris Mason, we could talk defense all day. I think a lot of it is actually on the offensive side.
Well, I didn't mention Satania or Trell Harris, right? Potentially. One thing is real quick is Marvin Jones Jr. apparently had a fantastic camp with the Seahawks. Rookie camp. They were saying they felt like they got a steal, that he was playing much closer to a fourth round pick, 5th round pick, something like that, than some guy they were able to pick up in the undrafted free agent market. They were saying he looked fantastic. So just to kind of extend.
And that goes to show what kind of development they've been getting from Miguel Chavis, who for a long time, the first couple of years of being here, was kind of getting shit on by a lot of people, right? As far as his, especially that one in the middle. But I mean, what he's done as far as recruiting, we know that's been good. But also, he's been developing these guys. They're buying in and they're getting the job done, right? But I think that you talked about this a lot. The word on him. I mean, Shotty Parker from Just My Damn Opinion, the former Georgia receiver, talked about him and said, "Man, it looks like Tarzan plays like Jane," when he was talking about Marvin Jones Jr. And same kind of thing you heard about him from Florida State as well. He got to Oklahoma, and what did Miguel do? Nah, dog, you're going to have to get after it. Because they don't mess around here. Your motor better be up here.
But you don't play. You just don't play. I mean, you see it in.
So
you see it.
He got value for himself being here is what I'm getting at. Long way of getting there, I guess.
Yeah, I just wish he had an extra year, because I think he could have been even better with another year. Same thing with Kendall Daniels, this new 5 for 5 thing, which we'll talk about if it ever becomes official.
Fourth round.
It would have both those guys. I think you could have convinced them NIL to stay, and I think both would be like, another year we move up. I mean, we move up in the draft. But that was just the tenor of the. I mean, Porter and Jenny were sky high. Roger Denny, gave an interesting little update. There's some rumblings over the stadium stuff. That's not going away. But Brent, other than the fact that he was in a neck brace from his neck fusion surgery that he had right after spring, which is just a consequence, I guess, of being a 6'1", 195-pound linebacker playing Nebraska fullbacks who were 6'2", 270 in the 90s. And try to stop the Nebraska
throwing his body in front of Lawrence Phillips and shit like that.
It's more like the fullbacks they used to have that were just refrigerators.
They were freight trains. Yeah.
Some of those guys, but the tenor was just very positive. Brent and Nagy are just very much in sync. The development process, obviously, Nagy was dying to talk about recruiting stuff, but he can't. When he wants to, he wants to. If you've seen any of his interviews, he's just dying for that NCAA rule to get knocked down so he can puff up what he's doing in recruiting.
So it's the dead period right now, so nobody can talk about anything.
No, he can't talk about any verbal commitment until they sign.
Oh, of course not. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's dying to talk about Cooper Hackett and Caden Benny and those guys. I mean, he's dying to talk about all the talent that they've picked. They've got verbal commitments from. So, yeah, it was it was a positive event. Yep. Dave Shear, you are correct. My favorite story is of him getting in an argument with kids playing football in the park and driving his car through the park trying to hit them. Thank you, Lawrence.
I forgot
Phillips.
about that story. Holy cow.
Old-time scumbag move. Thanks, Lawrence. But yeah.
Trying to kill kids in the park.
Trying to kill with your car. So after they apparently, had just been talking crap back to him. So yeah. Anyway. But Kchris, I just thought I had to have that note about Derek Johnson. So for your uncle, now he's not here. So you need to let him know that we were talking up his kid. So
yeah, he'll watch it soon.
So that's about it that's about it from the Caravan. I mean, there'll be a Tulsa one. There's a Dallas one. We might get a little more. We might get a little more based upon they knew all the Oklahoma City media who paid to attend were going to be there. So they were maybe watching their P's and Q's a little bit. When they go to Dallas or maybe when they go to Lawton, maybe we'll get a little bit more under the cover information. Because they won't, the media just won't be there as much for those stops. Although at Tulsa they may actually do a press conference because that's their chance to appease the Tulsa media from a certain aspect. So we'll see what happens. But we got these caravans going off the next couple of days, and then Dave Shear is on fire right now. If we have a really quiet off season, maybe we'll do an old felon episode of Sooner Intel. So,
yikes, man, that could get wild.
That could get ugly fast, but
that could get wild, man. We could dig into some shit though. That would be fun.
Edwin Simmons is my old-time first-round draft pick for Texas running back from the '80s, found naked in the president's backyard. And completely out of his mind, had no idea where he was. Institutionalized the next day. So
well done. Way to like, man, you're gonna go down hard.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, it was a top shelf meltdown. So from the '80s. So, but there you go. All right, do you want to shift to some 2014 CFP nonsense?
Yeah, and it is, I guess, and the reason I brought it up because I think we're hearing a lot of fans, and I'm struggling to really find, I put a poll up on my stream side just to kind of see where everybody's at. If you haven't voted and you're just on one of the other channels, at least come over to the Hall of Fame College Football channel and vote real quick. Right now we have 16 votes, and it's basically, 38% are saying no expansion. You've got 31 and 31 on the other two, right? So, and I think that is indicative of the rest of the country when it comes to the fans. Aside from your, not to be ugly, but about, your other power programs, power conference teams that are wanting access. And I think that's what it's boiling down to. The American Football Coaches Association, they're not officially changing the college football playoff, but they are trying to shape the public conversation. Coaches want a postseason that ends earlier, includes more teams, reduces calendar strain, and possibly removes conference championship games. One of the things that is becoming a very big sticking point, by the way. But are they trying to improve the sport, or are they trying to improve their situation? And why is it that Brent Venables, of all people, seems to be involved in this? Because everybody else that they're talking about that was kind of on this little committee, it's your Rhett Lashleys of the world and coaches out of the ACC, Big 12, and such that are voting in this way. So apparently, they want to maximize the CFP field, and they said maximize, which avoided saying 16 or 24 teams. But maximizing. Everybody's kind of assuming that it is 24 teams, but the coach's official language seems intentionally flexible. They're definitely pushing for more access in an earlier finish, not necessarily one locked in bracket size. But the first thing I say is coaches want more teams in because more teams equals more job security for them. Does it not? You're muted. This is an obvious critique for me, but more
it's a
playoff
very
spots
it's a self-interested motivation, right? I mean, this is very much we're doing this because this benefits us. I think part of the issue is that the SEC, a lot of SEC coaches are for this. They're basically saying, if you're sticking me with a nine game SEC schedule, then that's what I'm saying.
I understand, Brent. I understand,
if we're going to have to play 9 SEC games.
We just lost Mr. Mason for whatever reason. As he was saying, and Kchris, I'm going to let you jump in. If we're going to have to play 9 SEC games, I can understand why the SEC coaches want to jump to it. You're hearing Kirby Smart talking about it where he's kind of pushing towards that end as well. Yeah, Mr. Mason, I don't know what just happened there. You're muted again, though. Oh. Yeah, I'm not hearing you. But it's got you... No. Try to, maybe go out and come back in. I'm gonna get rid of your... Okay, Chris. But let me ask you about this. Where are you at on the conference championships? I think a lot of people, we've been talking about that a little bit as far as that being a byproduct of a 2014 playoff or that being a byproduct of a conference championship team not making the playoff because of the loss or something like that. Mr. Mason, can we hear you?
It's a byproduct.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. It's a byproduct. Oh, go ahead, Chris Mason.
Yeah, no, I think I think the SEC coaches are basically like, if we have to play 9 games, as 9 SEC games, we want to be able to get in at 9-3, right? We want to guarantee that some of us are going to get in at 9-3. I think that's it. I mean, I think that's. I want if I have a.
But that's a self-serving.
It is completely. You are right about that. So
that is not what the SEC fans want, by and large, from what I can tell.
Well, when do the fans ever get what they want in this game? I mean, so.
Fair enough.
But back to Kchris, your point.
I was just going to say it's a byproduct of the 12 team playoff. It's the simple fact that if to me you need to piecemeal this and take your time. What needs to happen is that college football needs to end way sooner than what it needs. It's fine to follow the executive order and all the rest of that stuff to allow Army and Navy to have their one weekend. But the whole thing is to play a season so long, to do all these other different things that you're doing with essentially adding more games to the season, you have to figure out a good schedule, a fine schedule to have the season end at a definite and earlier time period. That way the championship games actually do mean something. Because at the end of the day, college coaches are now having to figure out, what does my non-conference look like, right? Opposed to what does the championship game look like? Is it even worth it to play in that game by the end of the season? Mainly because you have, to me, I think the thing is that at the beginning of the season, it's like, okay, well, Bama kept Ohio State, but they got rid of Oklahoma State, right? But at the end of the day, they don't necessarily want to play Georgia in the championship game. They'd rather rest because their players need rest, right? It's just a whole dilemma because you've caused such a stir on those two ends of the spectrum of which games really mean the most, because now you don't have necessarily those marquee games. And what is the weighted system like? Because it's great that Big Ten fans you guys have won a championship, and that's perfectly fine. But at the same time, when Indiana is playing Abilene Christian, Grambling, and then they play then they go and play not Cal, but they go and play UTSA. Okay, UTSA gave them a test, and you're saying it's 37-31 was the game. But still, what does that prove, right? Whereas Bama schedules Wisconsin, then they schedule Ohio State, then they schedule this. It's just one of those things where it's not the same. And so I just think that you need to piecemeal this opposed to just jumping into a 24 team playoff, because you have a lot of holes and a lot of big things to address way before you even get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
schedule. Sorry, go, Jason. Go, Jason.
Well, no. Well, ending two conference championship games, it sounds logical on the face of it, but until you follow the money, and then also look, from a football standpoint, removing the conference title game, it can make sense. I understand that you're getting guys beat up, particularly in the SEC, where you're at, and it's already the toughest schedule in the country. I don't care what anybody says; it just got harder. But it eliminates a high-risk extra game, but financially it's a massive issue. $50 million is generated by the conference championship game in the SEC in Atlanta. $50 million. That's insane for one day. So when you start looking at that, it becomes, maybe you get more playoff spots and everything else, but it's extremely valuable. And title games are built into TV contracts as well, which is part of it. Now, there has been that conversation out there about naming a conference champion and then you have him play in games. That's not what the AFCA is first and foremost. I don't want it to sound like the AFCA has a lot of pull in all of this. This is a recommendation first and foremost, but it's not necessarily anything that matters. But there has been talk out there about having play-in games for the SEC and the Big Ten, where you'd have 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5 on getting the other 2 or whatever get in there, right? That could help generate the money back. But I think that people that have been bringing this up over the last couple of days have been saying, wait a minute, though. Now that you have these quote-unquote super-sized conferences, 16, 18 teams, some of these teams are not going to play each other throughout the year. If you're tied for the conference championship lead, or somebody wins it and they didn't have to play whoever it would have been in the conference championship game with them, do you like that? I mean, do we like, is that a good way to settle the championship game for such a large conference? And I would say no. The reason that they brought on conference championship games in the first place was because of multi-division conferences in leagues like this. The Big 12 and the SEC's been doing this since what was it, like 2006 or something like that they first started doing it?
First SEC championship game was like 1993, something like that.
Okay, but it was as they got bigger and went to divisions.
Big 12 in 1995, I think.
Yes.
Big 10
because they had 2 divisions, right?
The Big 10 and the Big 10 didn't have it forever, and the Pac-12 obviously stalled having it as well. So because they used to do all kinds of weird tiebreakers, like if you hadn't been in the Rose Bowl in 20 years, and the other guy you were tied with and you never played had been like 5 years before, you got to go, and silly tiebreaker stuff like that. I think it's the division stuff was when you had divisions, the championship games made a little more sense. You didn't often always get the best 2 teams in the conference. I mean, there was a whole stretch where OU and Texas were the best teams in the Big 12, and Dallas decided stuff, and OU and Texas to a lesser degree beat up on Colorado for like 4 or 5 years in a row. So I think, and the SEC has been unbalanced for a serious period, by either direction at times. So it's I don't know that I think if the big thing, the one thing, if they had fixed the schedule completely, like you start December 1st and you're finishing first week in January, I think I'd have a little bit more support for them.
That's the one right there. Keep FCS out of the college football playoff. So bring that comment back up, Jason. So thanks for Sooners for Life for putting that up. But when Chris Mason initially kind of zapped out for a second, that's what I was looking up. That's why I was a little bit kind of just trying to gather my thoughts because I was looking it up just to see, has a low seed in that kind of playoff format ever made the national championship game? And I can find nothing of it. If I'm wrong, somebody out there in the comments or after this video is posted, please let me know so I know what's actually going on in that tournament field. But I have never seen a team. I'm sure that there's
Say that again. What did you just ask?
I'm asking, has a lower seed, anything that's lower than 10 or 12 actually made a national championship game? I'm sure there have been plenty of teams that have maybe had an upset or two. But when I look at it,
I think the lowest seed, well, I think Notre Dame was like 10, weren't they?
I'm talking about in a 2014 playoff when you go to the FCS ranks. Has there been anybody that's 12 or lower that has ever made a national championship game? What is it going to? It's somebody said it earlier. It's just money. We already know this is money. This is contracts. It's all types of stuff. Which all gives it the more of saying that, hey, you can't run this legal prostitution ring anymore. You have to play these players, right? So at the end of the day, it's a whole yin yang effect with that scenario there. That's something of itself. But my thing is what does it truly?
What I would say about these rankings before the seedings are stupid right now. Yeah. They hadn't gotten them right in the first 2 years.
They haven't gotten
so I wouldn't call it.
There's a lot of stuff that's wrong with it on the onset, but I'm just asking, like, what's the point of adding another 12 teams to the fray whenever you know that, yes, Liberty may end up beating a bad Alabama team one year and they're crowned a Cinderella. Then they go up against a stout Ohio State team and get crushed. It's just... What is it really? What difference does it?
Are we talking like TCU, getting lucky against Michigan and then getting beat by 60 in the national title game?
I'm just, there's going to be one team in college football hell, us against Boise State, something like that, right? But what happens then the next week when Boise State has to go? Boise State beat somebody or whoever they beat, and then they have to go and play a Penn State or Notre Dame or whatever, and then they get crushed. They're just not on that level. Get what I'm saying? I just think that there's a lot of parity in college football now, but there's still gaps and there's still levels to this. So I just don't necessarily understand why a 8-4, there are 8-4 South Carolina that is just really bleeding, that has lost their head coach. This just prolongs the inevitable for a lot of teams, in my opinion, because you're sitting there saying, well, we can still play for something. Granted, our coach is going to get fired at the end of the season because nobody believes we're going to go that far. And again, we didn't really win anything. We're 8-4. There's going to be a bunch of 9-3 teams that do deserve to be there, but at the same time, you're just like, how much noise do they really make? I don't know. It's just something to think about.
Well, it's a byproduct of So obviously, I have a slight bias in this, being from England and following soccer's model, right? The Premier League separated from the rest. Used to be Division 1. English Premier League used to be Division 1, basically. And then they separated the top 30 programs, top 20 teams, basically separated, and they split up Division 1 into 2 leagues. Mm-hmm. And when you talk about the 2014 playoff, it's purely if you're in the SEC or Big Ten, you basically could have argued, maybe not this year, but in most years, that maybe the top teams from your conference represent the top 12 teams in the country. Maybe there's a big ACC team, maybe there's a Big 12 team, but for the most part, moving forward, you could argue that the top 12 teams in the country are maybe legitimately from the SEC and the Big Ten. So when you lose 25% of the playoff spots
but you can't do that part. You can't do that part because. Oh wait, go ahead. I think you're saying something different than what I think you're saying. Go ahead.
You're losing 25% of your playoff spots to other leagues, right? When you know that maybe you have 3 teams that should be in there instead. So I think that's kind of why this creep is occurring, is because they can't. The G6 or G5 or whatever we're calling it these days. I think it's the G6 now because the Pac-12 is back.
G6, yeah.
Yeah. Do they belong in the playoffs? And the answer is no, they don't.
No.
So that's a spot
And
right there.
this is why, look, if we're gonna sit here and say that they don't belong in the playoff, then why in the hell do we need a 2014 playoff?
We don't. It's a bloat it's a money bloat, right? On one side, and you can give guaranteed spots to the other folks, and it's a way. The problem is that you need to take the top 60 of college football, move them into a Premier League, and let the other 60, 72 teams, and although it continues to grow, right? Because North Dakota State went directly into Division I, right? And they're poised to possibly win their conference. So you need the other 72 teams to have their own playoff, their own TV, and it would, guys, I would pay money to watch more balanced, more competitive matchups. I'm a college football junkie. If there's two divisions of football and it's I could watch, and I would just throw out two teams here, not to annoy. I don't say they, if I could watch Georgia Tech play BYU in a second tier of football for the championship, let's say last year, right? Georgia Tech wasn't college football good, but if you could have moved them to a second tier and they could have played in a playoff there, and and they could have won a title, actually win a title, more teams would be competitive, and you'd stop having the teams that can't compete financially trying to compete with the other teams that are doing stuff at a different financial level. That's the big thing. That's where, hell, even do promotion.
And that's what it essentially comes down to, though, is that the group of six is fighting tooth and nail to stay relevant and stay involved in it because of the financial boon that they get for making a playoff. They can go and, I mean, this is almost like your FCS cupcake games that, they're coming and playing $1 million games because they need it for their program. Well, if you're at the G6 level, you're not making enough money to obviously compete, but 1 year or a couple of times of making that playoff by being the highest ranked group of six, it is huge for your program.
I mean, dude, you say it's an arrogant take, but what have we seen with the G6?
I'm not saying it's an arrogant take. He's
saying that's a pretty arrogant take, Chris. I'll just show that. It is, but we've watched the group of six teams get smashed in the first round of the playoffs. They're not competitive. And NFL draft tells us that the G6 talent pool is completely rated by Power 4. It's wiped out. You didn't have a G6 first round draft pick this year. I don't think there was one in the second round. It just completely has changed college football. The G6 talent pool is going to Power 4. The talent their talent losses aren't made up for by the guys leaving Power 4 going down to G6 because they can't compete anywhere else, or they've blown their chances and need to go somewhere else. So it's always been this way. There's a striation in college football programs. Just accept it. Let the G6 and the lower level of the Power 4 go play in their own league. Let them have their own championships, their own playoffs. There is enough TV money. There's enough streaming money that they'll make good money, and then they'll actually have a championship they can win. And that's a better driving force than, well, maybe we can get to the college football playoff as that. Oh yeah, we're in it, and then you get steamrolled by, an average team. So that's, to me, that's your issue is the CBA, Jason, and I'm completely on board with you on that. My issue is we need a Premier League of college football, and we need relegation and promotion in it as well. It will fix so much issues. It will make
I don't necessarily disagree with you. I don't think that that's really on the table at the moment, at least not as far as what we're hearing.
It needs to be. It's trying to pretend that North Dakota State and LSU are the same football teams and operate in the same manner is ridiculous. For starters, North Dakota State isn't rating children's hospitals to have their NIL money. So, I mean, it's just to pretend that they're the same is silly. And no other pro leagues do things this way, right? And no other you don't have competitions like this. I mean, the NCAA tournament is different, But even the NCAA tournament's getting stratified to a degree. I mean, they're expanding it, but it's not really going to benefit to a more competitive tournament.
No, it just makes them more money. It adds $50 million.
Well, yeah, exactly. They're expanding the tournament for more games and all that. But I'm telling you that you could have two separate league where if you are, I don't know, if you're Iowa State, so to speak, maybe not Iowa State's a bad example. If you're Memphis, you have a chance to win a championship, an actual championship of college football in the league that you're competitive in. That's a more meaningful. Because that's a bunch of teams that are starting college football with no hope of winning a championship. None. They're not. I mean, there's 70 teams that aren't even going to come anywhere close to getting into the playoffs off the bat. That you can eliminate right now. So.
Yeah.
And that's not productive. That's not the way. The NFL doesn't operate that way. Maybe the Jets and the Dolphins start the NFL season with no hope of getting to the playoffs, and maybe they're just playing out the string to just draft a quarterback. But for the most part, it doesn't. That's why the NBA is trying to do this losing. The anti-losing thing they're trying to put in to fix the lottery and all that. I'm just saying.
Hey, Chris Mason. Hey, be careful. Be careful. You don't want to. Hey, if you fall for. Hey, you're a smart guy. Don't fall for that dumbass trick right there. Those guys don't know what they're doing with that. But you keep going, though.
All right. But let's pretend they do. But anyway. Yeah. All right. But you're right. Okay, so I'll leave that alone. But I'm just saying, I think the CFP, expanding the CFP is just a byproduct of the fact that they won't compress. They won't split, right? Because if you had the six best teams in college football in a Premier League, you need an 8 or 10 team playoff max.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get that done starting December 1st and have it New
No,
Year's
well,
Day.
you don't. That is the biggest thing is that, to me, there is no way that you can justify needing 24. And I would tell you that you really can't justify 16. I don't think that they need to move away from the 12. And if anything, I think that 8 would have been a really good number, right?
Right.
I think 8 would have been a good number. The buys have been terrible for everybody that's gotten them, aside from Indiana. And they, look, good for them or whatever. But it's 1-7 for buy teams. 1-7. The G5 schools that have made it in have gotten beaten by like an average of 35 points. It's like 22 touchdowns or 23 touchdowns difference between the group of 5 schools or G6 schools and the teams that they've played once they've gotten into this tournament, right? It was one thing to do this under the old 14 playoff where you had the bowl champions. You still had the alliance or whatever where you were still playing the New Year's 6 games and all that stuff, and you stick them in one of those, in which time they were still getting the shit kicked out of them in those two. But they were getting an opportunity, right? They were getting an opportunity to do that. At the end of it, when you start looking at this, though, what are we really doing? Because at some point, there's going to get to a point where, we keep pushing this envelope and saying, well, no, it's not gonna render the regular season pointless, and it's not gonna do it and I don't think it has in the 12 team. I'm not saying that. In fact, I think that in some instances it's enhanced it because it has given more opportunities for some of those games at the end of the year to be more important and give you a chance. But there's going to be a number that's going to stop, and it starts becoming stupid. And why would the Big Ten need to make their schedule better and start playing good non-conference games or anything else if it's 24 team leagues and they're going to get the number that they need to get in anyway or that they want to get in anyway? Why do they need to do that? And why do you need to have rivalries anymore? Because if you can just cupcake it and the best record matters, and that's exactly where we're headed here. Because of all people, Sankey is the one that has been saying, "What did we even need a 12-team league? We were killing it in the 4. Why did we even need to go to 12?"
something that I can't get past that, guys. It's just the fact of unequal scheduling. That's really the only thing.
Yeah,
That's the only reason why. Now you're canceling out the the conference championship game. Whoop de freaking do. Whenever the committee still says early on in the season, we're looking at head to heads, and we're also looking at strength of schedule as well. But you're allowing such and such and such and such to come in only because of contracts and everything else. Because, Coach, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, but at the same time, Notre Dame, I mean, you kind of got to look at that as well. What does their schedule look like in the 2014 playoff? You know, are all bets off now that they?
What does it look like? What does it look like in the 12? It's trash.
It's trash. Yeah.
It's trash, especially now that USC and them are no longer playing. It looks like shit. They're playing Miami and BYU and SMU at the end, whatever. Big fucking deal.
Yeah, I mean,
All
right, well, Jason, pull up the image I have just so we can see how bad.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do this.
All right, so Oklahoma would be playing 20th ranked LSU. All right, okay. Tennessee's playing Virginia. Is this from last year?
Yeah.
Okay, this is from last year.
Yep, that's what it is.
From last year. All right, so OU
take a hard look at this, folks. This is insane.
We'd have to play LSU again at home in a rematch to start. Is that right?
Yep.
Cincinnati versus Notre Dame. Okay. Yeah, this is Georgia Tech 7. How is Georgia Tech 7?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay,
I don't know because they weren't. The standings in the Big Ten, though. Take a look at this. Take a look at what you're seeing there, because you've got read off some of these Big Ten teams to me that, like Illinois, for instance. Okay, so Illinois finished 8-4 in the regular season.
Right.
They're gonna get into the playoff at 8-4. Same thing goes for Iowa. Right. 9-3 USC would have gotten in, right? No doubt.
Yeah, this is the weirdest bracket, but all right. Okay, yeah. It's a weird bracket. I don't quite get all this, but all right. But yeah, you're right. I mean, this is a mess, obviously. But yeah, I mean, you've got games like Vandy or Arizona State.
Well, yeah, Arizona State was not even in the mix in the Big 12 at the end of the year.
I don't know.
And Sam Levitt wasn't playing. It doesn't even make sense. But if they were, this is probably off of AP rankings or whatever, or it was the final CFP rankings.
Yeah, this is messy. I'm not quite sure what they're doing here, but this is the first round games you're looking at. There's some interesting first round games. There's a couple, but the rest are just, Missouri versus UCF. Blah.
Oh no, this can't be right because Michigan's not in it. Why is Michigan not in it?
I don't know where they came up with this, but all right, just pretend. This is a fantasy land projection.
Because Tennessee wouldn't have been in it.
Chris Mason, if I just may add one thing, maybe it's not so bad after all. Look who's not in it.
Texas. Somehow Texas.
But let's go back and look at.
Go ahead.
What we need to kind of look at is the final CFP rankings.
All right, so I don't have those.
I'm gonna pull it up. Hold on, just a second.
Yeah, get this bizarro Fantasyland thing off.
This is insanity. You're the one that sent it to us. What the hell is this?
This is the first thing that came up when I did mock 2014 mock-up. This is the first thing that came up.
Good Lord.
Texas is missing. Sorry, Ben G and Bevo Bodyguard. That was not intentional. I didn't say, find me a CFP projection without Texas in it.
Guys,
that's so awesome.
I have no issues with this. This is beautiful. It's like, what?
All right. Let me do it here. Here we go. Here's the final
All right, so you'd have Indiana. Okay, so there's no problem with the top 4 seeds, right? Okay, that's fine.
Right.
And then the bottom, and then the next 4 are probably going to be fine too. It's Oregon, Texas A&M, Oklahoma. Okay. All right. Yeah. Other than Texas Tech was a complete fraud. The top eight's fine, right? Okay. But then
Yeah.
you'd have Alabama, I guess, playing the 24th seed, right? So that'd be 9, 24, 10 versus 23, something like that. That's how it should go, right?
We might want to look at the archives and do the penultimate ones. So the last ones before the playoff.
All right.
So you would look at, so it'd be week
Yeah,
14.
yeah, there you go. All right. Okay.
And then that way it's the teams that, because Notre Dame still didn't, no, it would be week 15. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let me go back to that. Because that dropped Notre Dame to 11, which didn't allow them in at 10-2.
Right.
And then an 11-2 BYU doesn't get in. So here's going to be your top teams. Utah would have got in. I mean, that's whatever. But you've got a bunch of 9-3 teams, 10-3, 11-2, fine. But what does that 11-2 mean? Iowa comes in at 8-4.
The funny thing is, when you look at this, Jason, there's not a lot more Big Ten or SEC teams in this thing. I mean,
no, you start putting a bunch of.
I guess the SEC gets Vandy and Texas in. All right, so they get 2 more. The Big Ten gets 2 more in Michigan and USC, and then they get Iowa.
And Iowa, that's 3 more.
Yeah, 3 more. So they get 3 more in. How much more Group of 5 do we get? Nonsense.
Well, let's look. So no, you would be the same amount because it's the top 24. North Texas wouldn't make it in, but Iowa at 8-4 makes it in. You get Houston at 9-3, Georgia Tech at 9-3. They got beat up by. Well, I'm not going to talk about bowl games. Never mind.
Yeah,
Tulane. Tulane. Yes, they beat Duke at the start of the year, but Darius Mensah wasn't playing. Arizona at 9-3. Who the hell knew they were 9-3? I didn't even know.
They had a good year. They had a good end of the year. They were playing good
football.
Yeah,
and I mean, like Vandy at 10-2. I mean, I felt like it was messed up to not put them in anyway. That's the one team that got burned for their SEC schedule. And it's just because it was Vandy. If their name wasn't Vandy, they get in at 10-2 as an SEC program, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could see why coaches who are traditionally struggling to get to 9-3, and that's a great season for them, like Virginia, like Houston, like Arizona. You could see why if I was their coach, I'd be like, hell yes, I'm voting to go to 24, right? Because this actually gets me. Well, this gives me a theoretical chance, right? Looking at this tells you why college coaches were voting for this. Because if you were like, scroll back up, if you were like Arizona and you're on a heater and you've been playing really well and you can win a playoff game, what that can do for you in recruiting, NIL support from your alumni, it's huge. That's why you're doing this. If you're Vandy, you'd have loved to get Pavi into the playoffs, right? That would have been a huge.
But at some point. Yeah, listen. If you're Vandy, you want it. If you're Vandy, you want it. If you're Arizona, you want it. If you're BYU, of course. Now BYU, I think, has the biggest beef out of everybody because they go 11-1. The only loss they had to was Tech, and they're But the Big 12 is the one Power 4 conference that has yet to get a second team in the same season.
Now this gets them. So I can understand why. If you're on a committee with coaches, right, and I can understand why a coaches group said, looking at this, we're like, hell yeah, we should move to 24. Gets me in the playoffs, gets us more participation in it. I just don't
it helps.
know.
I get a bonus. And all this shit.
Yeah, I mean, what's his name? I'm sure Jimmy Sexton was in the room telling everybody to vote for this, so we can redo everyone's freaking contracts. But to Chris's point, and I just want to reiterate because I'm not sure everybody got this. Like the lower level of college football has a 2014 playoff, right? They play home games and they go through. What Chris is saying and they've been doing this for years. So that's the one problem.
They do it well.
And they do it well, right? But what Chris is saying, if you go back the last 10 years and look at the 2014 FCS playoff and look at really what's happened there aren't lower seed. The 24 seed is never winning the national championship in that. They're not. It's always one of the higher seeds that are winning it. And they've been doing this for 20 years, whereas we keep modifying the 12-team playoff. We're not never letting it just sit and see what the results are like for a couple of years and then make a decision. I think the move to 12, I think the move to 16, if you do that, just make sure it's first round playoff games at home, second round playoff games at home. Compress the schedule. The stupid, executive order about no football games on Army Navy weekend is just silly. It's just
That's
ridiculous.
not what it is, though. But hey, you didn't read my column, obviously, because that's not what his executive order said. It said that nobody can play during that time frame that they're playing. So whatever they play in the morning.
Okay, well, it's
that whole thing was a much ado about nothing. It was a big nothing burger. But here's what it did illuminate to me was that they're not fixing this scheduling difficulty crap because they don't want to. They want to have excuses to continue doing what they're doing and expanding things instead of actually fixing what's actually wrong with college football. Why in the hell are we waiting until the 25th of January for the next 2 years to crown a national champion? It's the stupidest thing in the world. And that's part of what the AFCA did bring that up. It's a complication nobody wants to touch. They don't want to mess with Army Navy. The other part is they want to do one bye instead of two, and they want to make sure that the playoff is over by the second week of January.
And it should be over the first week at the latest.
Listen, I agree with you, but that's a bet. It's better than what it is at the moment, right? But look, playing games. There's a lot of way that you could do this, but the coaches are calling for a postseason that's bigger, earlier, and supposedly cleaner. Problem is that in college football, every solution creates another argument. Yeah. We're going to have another fight, right? Yeah. Every time. So
the SEC basically it's like the UN Security Council, right? They have a veto vote on this.
Yeah, well, and that's the other point I wanted to make. I said it a minute ago that the AFCA can make this recommendation, and to a larger point, I wanted to bring into this. Obviously, Brent Venables has a piece in this. For all you fans, this is interesting because he's attached to the AFC side of the discussion, and I think that he is speaking for SEC coaches in some regard. But is he personally dictating the future of the playoff? I don't think he is, but it does put him near a national conversation that affects Oklahoma directly, and it affects him directly. If you get into the playoff, you're in great shape. You're in great shape. J.D. Piquel was talking about how his job security was today on his show. I don't even know where that comes from, but it's stuff that we've talked about as a fan base at some point, because it wouldn't take too long for him to not be in a safe place if they don't play well this year. But a larger playoff creates more margin for error in the SEC, which is great. But a 9-3 SEC team, do you think they really have a realistic path in a 16 or 24 team model to win the whole thing?
Well, it's from an abstraction, probably not, but I'm sure, depending upon
then what are we talking about?
I agree. 16 would be as large as I would want to go. I just fix the 12-team playoff, get the G6 out of there, and get this and remove this. Tell Notre Dame get in a frickin' conference, get in the Big Ten of the ACC. We're no longer going to carve out an independent role for you. If they say, well, we're not going to do that, we'll just stop scheduling you then. You'll become irrelevant. And we'll keep you, we'll become irrelevant. That's the problem, is we need to make sure the 12 teams in the playoff are, for better part, at least the 8 teams in the playoff, the 8 at-large bids, are the actual 8 next best teams in college football. Fix that first. Then tell me that it needs to go to 16 after that works for 4 or 5 years, and we have some understanding that we are missing some teams that are truly competitive in it. Have a 12. Have a at-large 12 team. Go scroll back up so we get here. Okay, so and that in the world I'm talking about, right? So have BYU as the 12th best team in the country, right? Because I think we get the 4 conference champions with those 12 teams, because Notre Dame is part of the ACC, right? So, or Miami should have been ACC champion. That's stupid. that stupid tiebreaker nonsense they had was crap, right?
Yeah, well,
So
and that's the other thing is that why are we jumping to 16 or even 24 when they haven't really got the format right at 12 yet?
right. So at BYU, if this was the 12 teams that had made the college football playoff, right, and you have the bottom 8 are all, Oregon through BYU are all at large bids, right, and BYU actually wins the championship, or a 10 or 12 seed wins the championship in the 4 or 5 years that you actually run it, to actually get some effing data about how it's going to work, then you might have a justification to say, well, maybe we should move to 16 because the lower seeds in the tournament are actually winning it. But if it's still Indiana or Ohio State, the first or second seed wins it every year, and everyone says, well, Ohio State was 7, well, that was seeding nonsense.
Yeah, but that's seeding bullshit.
Yeah,
Again,
right.
like
they were really the second team or the first team in the country, talent-wise. We all know that. It was they just gacked that game against Michigan, and they should have been ranked higher. So this is my problem: is the 12-team playoff. We don't actually know if that works if we actually have the 12 best teams in college football playing. And you're muted yourself, Jason.
not only are we not having the best 12 teams, we don't have the best 12 teams, but they don't even care about having the best teams. That's not what this is about. And so, but at the end of the day, at some point, access becomes inflation. And when everybody's still alive, the regular season is absolutely going to lose some of its edge towards the end of the year. But right now, I think they've kind of hit a sweet spot where more games can matter later in the year. I think that that's a good thing. But there's going to come a point when you can't lose enough games to come out of. If Iowa can get in at 8-4, and they would have, and you have that many 9-3 teams, not that they needed to be in. We're talking about a bunch of 9-3 teams, like USC that didn't belong. They didn't beat anybody in their conference that was good.
They beat Michigan, but that's it.
Okay, Michigan.
And
Cool.
Michigan deserved to be in. I mean, that's another question. I mean, that's, you know what I'm saying?
That's what I'm saying, though. They had their play-in. To me, those were their play-in games. They had their opportunities to get into the playoff, and they didn't do it. So if those games no longer hold any meaning to whether or not you get into the playoff, then why the fuck are you playing them?
Right. So the NFL has, 32 teams, and they have 10 playoff spots? Is that right? Or 6? 12. They have 12
No,
playoff
it's 16. It's 16.
The NFL has 16 playoff spots?
No, I guess it is 12 because the wild card. Yeah, it's 12, right?
All right. And so, okay, so that's all right. But
it's
those
40%. It's 40%.
Yeah, but that's 30 balanced teams doing the same thing, right? If you had 30 college football teams, the top 30 college football teams every year.
Be careful with that. Be careful with that now. Because in order to do the FBS better be whatever the big 2 is, if they go to that, or a big 3, however they do it, it better be close to 70, or you alienate 3/4 of the country.
No,
and then you do kill the golden goose.
But I'm just saying that for the most part, if we had the 12 best teams in the college football playoff, you have 4 automatic bids for the 4 Power 4 conferences. And Notre Dame is basically told, get in a Power 4 conference, or we're no longer dealing with you.
They're not going to do that. Number one, first and foremost, they're not going to do that to Notre Dame. Stop. We don't. That's a conversation that is wasting time. Okay, they're never going to do that to them.
But they should. But regardless, they're not going to. But that's fine. They can obviously they can't bend. No, you can't bend Notre Dame to do this, but they just won't. I don't understand why. But regardless,
why would you, when you're making the same amount of money, not doing it?
Well, I get Notre Dame's viewpoint, but I don't understand the others. Notre Dame's viewpoint makes complete sense. I don't understand the other conferences not leveraging Notre Dame. But that's a whole other.
If the people that are upset really wanted to screw Notre Dame, they'd stop scheduling them.
That's what I'm saying. They've never done that. But regardless, they're getting close to doing it.
Right.
They're getting very close to doing it.
Well, I don't know about all that.
Well, I mean,
but maybe Texas belongs to them. I'm looking at these 9-3 teams, and I'm not seeing a one of them, even Texas, that I believe belonged in the 12-team playoff last year. Houston, Georgia Tech.
Vandy's the only one.
They were 10-2. They were 10-2.
Yeah, but 9-3 teams,
Right.
So I'm just trying to, and I'll end this point because I need to jump up. I'm just trying to imagine this fall in December OU is 9-3, and I really think they have a legitimate argument to be in the playoffs. That OU has lost 3 games and belongs to be in the college football playoff. And I'm having a hard time coming up with those 3 losses that would justify that. I guess if they lost to Florida on the road, they lost at Georgia, and they lost at Michigan. But they beat Texas. They beat Texas A&M. They beat Ole Miss. What other big win would they have? What other big win do they have? I'm trying to imagine. That would be the 3 wins that would offset the 3 losses, I guess, right? Texas A&M, and Ole Miss. So I guess if they were 9-3 with that schedule, and Michigan is 11-1 or something, and has just been better than anybody could have ever imagined. And trying to give OU credit for that non-conference loss, which Texas didn't get, but okay. But they have a more difficult SEC schedule, and there's more 9-3 teams in the mix for it, right? There's not enough 10-2 teams in this scenario. There's not enough 10-2 teams There's not enough 10-2 teams from the SEC and the Big Ten to fill out the bracket. Right, and you can't.
Yeah, it's easy to sit here and pretend that a bunch of teams could win the national championship. I think more teams can win the national championship today than we've ever seen in the past. And NIL is a big part of that, right? Obviously, if Indiana can win it when they're the losingest college football team of all time because of NIL, then more teams can do that.
And the transfer portal. I mean,
the portal is obviously part of that as well.
Yeah, part and parcel.
But here's the thing. Until we start actually seeing this happen, right now, Indiana's an outlier. They've got a big billionaire that wanted to, listen, he's a sports guy. He's had an NBA team, won a championship in that. This is a different deal. When we go back and see another BYU championship, or we see Utah going to win in the Natty, or we see Virginia, or we see Georgia Tech or Iowa for that matter, then okay, great. But until then, the truth of the matter is there's maybe 8-9 teams that can win it right now. And maybe if you want to stretch it out and say there's an outside shot that maybe 12 teams can. But that's stretching. And what are we doing? At some point you are going to overinflate what you have. And it's gonna render the regular season pointless. It really is. And I think at some point that's when people stop giving a shit about your product.
Yeah, there's a tipping point. Hey, Chris, you got any last comments for us?
Yeah, hey, Chris, you got to unmute before you do it.
No, I got it. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
we
got you. We're getting background noises while I cut it.
Oh, you're good. No, I think that you guys have made a lot of great points. I just think the expansion is just really silliness at this point because, again, I think Chris Mason made a great point earlier. You don't necessarily have the data points to back it. Now it just kind of seems that we're just making this kind of too inclusive, too inclusionary, right? Like it's just a lot to really ask for at this time when you have a lot of bigger issues that you need to deal with to be able to get that. I think you still need to piecemeal it. But, on the back end of it, I just don't think that there's anything out there that shows that it's really beneficial to college football because it again, getting rid of the conference championship, it still does nothing unless you're playing the entire month of December to get to that first week of
January for a title game.
Yeah. I mean, like, what are we doing now? We have to start the season way earlier, midweek of August. It's just a lot. I think that they need to really think this through and kind of spend some more time because I don't think there's enough out there that warrants this just yet.
And we just don't have enough data yet from a 12-team playoff. Let it run for 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I do think
I don't think that's what's going to happen. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I agree with you.
The SEC has a veto vote. I mean, it's like the UN Security Committee. I mean, they can.
Well, no, it's up to the Big Ten and the SEC, and they have to be in lockstep because they're in charge of it. They've taken charge of it. Yeah. People forget that that's what happened last year. That the Big 12 and ACC rolled over. In fact, it was 2 years ago that they basically handed them all the power and, whatever. And then they bitched about it all last year. And so that they did, we were already going to be the 16 teams, but then they were able to get the Big 10 and SEC fighting. Right now, Sankey is dead against this expansion past 16. But if the rest of if the teams if the universities in the SEC tell him shut up and go to 24, he's got to do it. That's who he works for.
But again, the college presidents and all that don't want longer seasons. They don't want that. So we'll see.
They want more money. They do want more money.
Yeah, but there's a lot of forces at play here. So I don't know. It's fascinating. A lot of people, though, I think have overestimated that what the coaches want versus what they get. The coaches have wanted 5-year football eligibility for 20 years and have never gotten that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, they get a lot of what they want, especially when Nick Saban is pushing it. But at the end of it, you have to really understand that this isn't going to be about what the AFCA wants, nor should it be, by the way, because they definitely they have a benefit in this. They're benefiting from this, from it being as big, because it helps them get bonuses and job and contract extensions and everything else. The coaches are calling for a postseason that's bigger, earlier, and cleaner, but access versus tradition, player welfare versus TV money. Look, I would love to add the conference championship part. I think there's part of me that wants to see that stay, but I'm okay with switching it out with play-in games, because it wouldn't be part of the playoff, but it would definitely be important and fun to watch. And I think it would also be a big moneymaker for the leagues, would it not?
Yeah, so I think I like the idea of playing games. I like the idea of
I do too.
Vandy and Texas, or rematching, or we get a second shot at Texas for a shot at the playoff.
Sure.
Something. I mean, you do that, and that game's gonna, if you do that, it could definitely work. But they got to fix.
And it could definitely work itself out that way too. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You gotta fix some other things. Get a CBA. Get a CBA first, and
ta-da! CBA, what?
And then maybe you expand maybe you tie that in. Look, get a CBA, and then we'll expand the playoffs. But I don't know. It's when you pull up the 24 teams that it could be from last year. There's some ugly, non-compelling first round matchups. There's some decent ones, but there's some terrible matchups too. And I'm just not sure how many of those teams go on to beat any of the eight byes. I just don't know. I think Oklahoma takes care of whoever they would have played when you change it up. I think actually OU would have got a bye, wouldn't they? Because they've been 8. They were right. They would have been a bye. So OU would have gotten a bye. So we wouldn't have played anybody until the second round. So, we wouldn't have played. So probably would have played Bama if Bama could have beaten like Iowa. Is that right? Maybe. So
I don't know how it would have worked out. I don't know how it would have ended up working out. I didn't look at a bracket. That bracket that you pulled up. I mean,
I'm
it
sorry,
was wiggy,
it was so bizarre.
I didn't pay attention to it until we got it up on the screen.
Yeah.
But here's the deal. Finally, at some point, you're going to figure it's probably going to look crazy like that, though, in some way, shape, or form. I'm going to send this to you, Kchris. Finish this off. We've been going for an hour and 28 minutes. What is your final feeling about expansion, and do you see it happening?
I gave you guys my feeling. Again. I think it's pointless. I think it's not beneficial to anybody. There's not enough data to go behind it, but it's going to happen. It's inevitable if it's on the table. They've been messing with it for the longest. I always thought the most plausible argument that you can have for something like this would be you go from 4 teams to 6, the next 2 in, right? If you want to do anything, 8 to me was kind of pushing it, but I thought that was kind of the magical number anyway.
I agree. I think 8 was the number.
8 was the number. I think that you can't make the same argument that you make for FCS football, and I do not want to discredit any of that because they produce a lot of players, and know there's Hall of Famers that came from there and HBCUs and all the rest of that stuff. But I think right now with where the game is at with college football, at with P4 at the very least, I just think that that's not necessarily plausible at this point, but I think it's inevitable.
Agreed. Guys, let us know what you think. If you're watching this on a replay, make sure that you've hit that like button, subscribe to all the channels. Go make sure you hit all the like buttons on all the channels. But if you're watching this on a replay, let us know what you think. Do you want to see expansion? According to the poll I've got in here right now, we have 48% say no expansion at all. And that's coming from mostly OU fans, no expansion. I think that there's other things that they could do to fix this. There's other things that they could do to fix the scheduling and doing some of this other stuff first that would more benefit it. And at some point, fix how you're doing. Fix the way that you're holding the playoff as it is. The seeding, play home games for the first two rounds. The only game that isn't in home stadiums is the championship game. That would be cool. Should be at the Rose Bowl every year, but it won't be. But whatever. At the end of the day, figure it out. But you don't have to move it up. You don't have to go to 16 or 24. But certainly, don't go to 24 when that's not what anybody is asking you to do. The product is killing it right now. Nobody's asking you to do that, but a bunch of coaches that are trying to hold on to their millions. Let us know what you think in the comments. We'll see you all on the next one.